All right, folks, we are also live on YouTube. Oh, I got some folks coming in. This is my bad. Okay, so we are also streaming live on YouTube. It looks like we're on a road trip with Robert. That looks fun. Nobody watched that. You might barf. Luckily, everyone's at home. So
trying to set my camera up so I can see you.
Hey, people got their cameras on. I'm not doing that.
Oh, you don't have to put your cameras on. But I would ask if you can, please mute yourselves. And if you have a question, for those of you who are joining us via Zoom, there is a chat box. You type your questions in there. And for those of us who are watching on YouTube, there's a place to put live comments. So if you have questions, put them there and I'll answer them as I get to pause in my presentation. Now, I need to warn you, I became a lawyer because I am not into math or technology, so please bear with me. I'm hoping you see my screen. Oh, okay. Well, I guess you're just going to have to see it this way. Sorry, folks. All right. So today we're talking about property tax protests. I'm sure the majority of you who are on the Zoom have received your value. But if you haven't yet received your value, that is because at least DCAD is doing rolling values this year, or I'm sorry, rolling notices. So the first round of notices went out April 15th. And if you received your notice recently, your intent to protest is due no later than May 17th. But I highly, highly, highly recommend you do it sooner than that. The next round in Dallas will be May 15th. And Robert, I know you're in the Houston area. I think this is going to be the same for Harris County. I don't have their schedule, but will be May 15th. And then those will be due at their traditional June due date. So that's really important. You do not want to miss your due date. Another thing that I've been doing these for years, and I'll give you my history in a minute, but right now while I'm thinking about it, when you send it, if you send it via mail to DCAD, your notice of protest, make sure you scan that and you scan the envelope and you scan all of those things, because DCAD has a tendency to lose those notices of value and say you never sent them. So the more evidence you can have that you did send them, the better off you will be. All right, so tonight I'm going to give you an overview about myself and Cadillac law, and then we're going to talk about how horrific values are, how the county assesses, what a homestead has to do, how does that help you, if at all. And then I'm going to go through an example presentation, and I'm going to use that as a way to show you like what kind of evidence you want to use and what kind of arguments you can make. All right. So Cadillac Law is the name of my firm. I established the firm in 2013 specifically to do property tax protests. I did my first property tax protest while I was in law school. It was the summer of 2009. And I didn't like my value, and I was in ad law, administrative law, and the professor told us how to protest. And so I did. And I went and I saved, like I got 5,000 reduced on my value. And I was just like, I'm going to be the best lawyer ever. And it gave me an unusually high amount of confidence. And so when I came to Dallas, I protested my own property when I bought it, and I did really well. And that just reinforced my false sense of confidence. And I started telling people, oh yes, I do these. And I started getting business. So I established a law firm. Why not? I have been serving Oak Cliff and Dallas since 2016 in a full-time capacity. The firm has emphasis on real estate matters, probate, estate planning. We work with real estate investors. One of my longest running clients is a plumber. If it touches real estate, we do it. We usually work mainly in the residential area, and that's just how things have worked out in my life. I don't end up doing a lot of commercial, and I'm totally okay with that. I really like helping families. I'm particularly fond of helping small business owners and families, but it really just will help anyone. We are women owned and operated. In this picture here, this is Jamisha, my paralegal of 4 years, and these are her 5 children. So this photograph is why we do what we do. It's because we want to feed these precious mouths. And I'm so happy that I've had Jamisha work with me for so long. So myself, I went to Arizona State University. I got an MBA in 2008 from Western International University. 9 days after I completed my MBA, I started my JD because I am a glutton for punishment. I've been out of law school for 10 years, and as the glutton for punishment, I decided to go ahead and start an LLM, which is basically a master's degree in law in taxation, which I'm sure you're all incredibly jealous of the thrilling coursework I'm going through. I know. But I don't like paying taxes. I like following rules, but I don't like to pay taxes. So what I'd like to know is just all the rules so that I don't have to pay taxes. And that's why I'm getting the LLM to help my clients, to bring this information to y'all. I moved to Dallas in 2011 after graduating law school with AT&T. I had done an internship there between my first and second year. I don't know why, but they liked me and they brought me up here. And I worked for them, negotiating contracts, methods, procedures in the supply chain for 5 years. And I went full-time in my firm in 2016, and I have not looked back. In 2019, I received an award from the city of Dallas to create and operate their title and assistance program, which we call TAPA. It is for folks who are in residences or have a tie to real property that is not owned by them. So a lot of times, people will live in auntie's house and auntie's passed away, or maybe it was grandma's house or whoever. I'm working with the city to help people clear those title issues. So that was definitely a big point of pride for me to do on my own. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. And again, if you have questions, chat them to me if you're on Zoom. And if you're watching us on YouTube Live, I'm sorry you got to see the border. Sorry to everyone for the border of this machine, because I'm just not that good with them. And if you have questions, put them in the text box and I will get to them. All right, so why are our taxes so high? Well, in DFW in particular, and actually in Harris County, Robert, this would apply to you, there's been growth. I mean, just astronomical growth. If you remember, Toyota came here. We've got Tesla and the whole space thing down in Austin. I heard that, what's his face? Elon Musk is moving to Brownsville. Pretty much nobody wants to be in California anymore because they pay taxes out the yin yang, and they have they have legislated themselves to just like an inability to function, which Dallas is on the fast track to, folks, if we aren't careful, okay, as a side note. But so folks have just come here, and it's actually been great. So the growth, however, has created a demand like we have never seen before. And this is true. I saw someone just made a note that they're in Collin County. It's all right, we'll forgive you. Just kidding. You guys have the best probate court in North Texas. So kudos, lucky you. All of DFW has just immensely grown. The city of Dallas in particular is built out. Like, there's nothing left. You can't buy raw land in the city of Dallas unless it's one of these lots that's in the middle of a well-developed neighborhood and probably owned by someone who's deceased. So this is a real basic economics equation that, economics not exactly my thing, but it's supply and demand, right? There's hardly any supply and there's a great demand. Now, add to that, everyone and their mother wants to be here in Texas. There's very little supply, there's huge demand. And then we have a state legislature who continually dumps the responsibility for everything onto the counties. This is particularly true when it comes to education. The Texas legislature used to pay like 60% of each person's education, and it's down to less than 40. Now, when you're in a DISD where like kids are only eating because they're at school, so they're getting like 2 meals a day and they are otherwise starving, we have to pay for that somehow, right? And the legislature more and more is saying, no, you can't have the oil money to do that. Use your own money. And so the actual percent of taxation has increased due to our legislature. So I want y'all to think about that. They are in session right now, and we will get a lot of new laws, and they will all become active on September 1st. And you may or may not like them, but when you don't like them, what you need to do is go vote. And you need to vote for people who are not going to dump the burden onto the taxpayer. So one of the more important things that you will learn tonight is that the assessment is made on January 1st. Okay. Now, this is super important to all of us that survived the snowpocalypse because many of us had damage, but the snowpocalypse was in February, and the county is assessing from January 1st. So for those of you that have burst pipes, you lost your kitchen, whatever, that's sad. I'm sorry. It was a crazy time. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. I'm even more sorry that that's not going to be able to help reduce your value this year because it didn't happen on January 1st or before. So when we're looking for evidence, as we get into the evidentiary type things, we are looking for things that were broken or destroyed or non-functioning on January 1st. Now, there's no way for them to verify that it was on January 1st. You're just asserting that you're not lying. But if it's related to the ice-pocalypse, they'll know because, you know, we all suffered through that. And I learned that I will never be able to live or survive in a cold climate. So yay. Just remember, January 1st is the date of assessment. All right. So how does the county then make the assessment? There's really just a couple methods they use. For commercial property and even residential rental, which is still classified residential, but you and I would think of it having a commercial function because it's used to earn money, they can either use the income method or the comparison method. So for those of you that own maybe an office building, you have a commercial piece of real estate, you can go and show them your rent rolls, show them that you're, you know, at only 5% occupancy, that half is owner occupied, whatever. And that is something they will look at. That is the income method. The comparison method is also what they use for residential and residential homestead. So houses that you are living in, they're going to compare to other properties of like and kind, and they will use the MLS against you. So our tax value is assessed at a market value. Now, I think that's a crock. I hate that. I think it's disgusting. I don't think the government should get market taxes from us, but that's the law. So until I am president, that is the way it will continue to be. And you need to be mindful. The year I bought my house, I closed in 2012. I was supposed to close at the end of 2011, but it turns out someone was in prison and they didn't know anyhow. So we end up closing in 2012. And when I went in to protest my value, they used the language from the MLS, y'all. So where the realtor's like, beautiful backsplash, newly remodeled, because you know they're trying to sell something. The CAD read line by line what the realtor had put into the MLS. Now, luckily, I had taken photographs of that area of the house, and I was like, recently remodeled as in this century, but these are not GFCI outlets. So they obviously either didn't follow the law or they did it before that was a rule. And I was able to counteract that MLS. Well, one year I tried to sell my house and nobody bought it. And I went in the next year and they're like, well, what about this? Your realtor says you have this. And I said, well, realtors tout. That's what they do. They puff. It's called puffery. You've got to be able to combat any argument they're making. So if your house has been in the MLS recently, and you can see the MLS language on Zillow, if you just go to Zillow, if it's been in the last 5 years, they will find it and they will try to use it against you. So go find that language and find the evidence that counters what they're going to say, which is what is written in there. And they're just going to believe that. I mean, come on, it's sales. The comparison method, they're going to use other houses in your neighborhood. I can't do air quotes very well because I recently had surgery on this hand, and so I can't really bend it. So I'm air quoting with my left hand only, okay? Your neighborhood. So for those of you who are familiar with Oak Cliff, you know that Kessler Plaza is not Kessler Park, right? Well, the CAD would love to say otherwise. Well, it's near Kessler Park. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's near $1 million home. So my value went up? No, thank you. No, sir. The way I combat that is by, when we're in person, having them pull up a map, and then I'll physically walk away from the podium. This is something we learn in law school, that you want to like physically walk and try to physically engage. So I'll physically walk from behind the podium and I'll stand at their map and I'll point and I'll be like, this is where all the crackheads live and this is not nice and or whatever I can do. And I'll slander the area the house is in because it's not the same neighborhood. In my personal property, I live in Ravinia Heights. So if you're in Oak Cliff, you know maybe where that is. Do not compare my Ravinia Heights property to one of the properties over in Sunset Hills. You can't do it. We're in 2 different zip codes. I know we're like only a couple streets away, but it's 2 different zip codes. These are the type of comparisons they're making. So the law says your neighbor. So when I use comparisons, and I'm going to show you some when we get to the example, I use only properties on your street, because I am strictly adhering to the law in that case and strictly adhering to the letter of the language of the law. So I only use neighbors on your street if they're favorable. If they're not favorable, I just ignore them. They are going to use neighborhoods that you don't consider your neighborhood. In fact, it might not even feed into the same school as you. It might be same school district, but it maybe not the same school. So you want to make sure that when you look at what their comps are, because they're going to show them to you, that you are able to say, no, that isn't my neighborhood, or no, that's a better neighborhood. That's a neighborhood I couldn't afford, those kind of things. When people hire me for this, they say, Lauren, should I come? And I say, no, you do not want to come, because what I will do is I'm going to make it sound like you live in filth. Okay. I'm going to talk so ugly about your house. You would be embarrassed if you were there. I mean, when I do my own, I'm embarrassed. I tell them, I can't believe I live this way. I'm not actually judging. I don't actually care. I just want to win. And so I use every dramatic flair I can. I'm an aggressive winner. I don't. So, okay. So you guys, what about your homestead, right? Like I thought I had a homestead. I thought that did something. Well, it kind of does, but not really. See, math is a real tricky thing, and it's not something I'm great at, but your homestead exemption, you must be in the house on January 1st in order to have a homestead exemption. So like I told you, my property, I was supposed to move in December. I was supposed to close and move in December, but I ended up closing January 13th because of this criminal. And I didn't get homestead for 2012 because I didn't live there on the 1st. Think about that when you're choosing a closing date, okay? You think about this story and how I had to go a whole year without my homestead because of some prisoner. You must be in the house on January 1st to get the homestead exemption. What does the homestead do? Well, it does help lower the tax burden. It does not change your tax rate. It doesn't affect the value, but it helps lower the burden. And it does not change the value from rising. However, it puts a cap on increases. So I'm going to try to actually, let me do this. Stop sharing for a moment. Okay. So I'm going to draw something, okay? Not well because my functional hand is not functional. So let's say you buy a house for $100,000. This is obviously not in today's time. Jorge, you can close in the 31st, but you have to live there on the 1st. So I would definitely have a bed there by the 1st if that's the scenario. Okay, so let's say your house is $100,000, right? That's year one. And they have you valued at 100 and you don't go dispute it because you're like, 100, that's fabulous. But year two, they come back and they say, okay, your house is now valued at 200,000, right? So we've doubled in value. Now, if you have your homestead, which you should because you've learned about them, you've watched the seminar, and now you know, that year, on year two, you're paying taxes on 110,000. There's a 10% cap on the value. However, if you don't go dispute the year it's 200,000, the next year when they raise it to 300, your value that you pay your taxes on is 220 because it's 10% above the year before's value. That's the catch, y'all. That's the catch. Jorge, I just saw it in your eyes. I had to sit down and really math that out one time because I'm like, this is fishy, right? And also, why would the government do us any favors? Okay. And so I went and I read the law and I looked at the math. They don't do you favors, folks. That's why you have to protest. Okay. So it's a 10% cap on the prior year's value. What good does that do me? I mean, I'm talking 3 years out. I'm paying 220 in this scenario. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that you all understand that. It's 10% over the year before's value. So if you didn't dispute it when it popped up to 200 in that scenario, you're totally screwed. All right, so like, what good is that? 65 plus exemption, folks ask me about this all the time. If you made it to 65, congrats. I hope that you someday will get to retire. I'm looking forward to that in my life someday too. Basically what the 65 plus exemption does, it locks you, I said rate, I need to say value. It locks you into the value on your 65th birthday. So back in my scenario where it's 100,000, it was 100,000 on my 65th birthday. And I send in the form, I got to notarize it, send a copy of my ID, then they know I'm 65. I'm locked at 100,000. So when that house goes up to 200,000, I don't care. I don't care what the value is. I'm only getting taxed at what I was locked into on my 65th birthday. But think about this. If I'm 65 and the property value is 200,000 when I lock it in, and then the market crashes, falls out from under us, and now my house could only sell for 100,000, I absolutely still need to go dispute the value because they'll lock me in at the 200. And that's no savings for me as a 65 plus. Now you'll hear all these people, well, I'm 65, I don't pay taxes. She was 65, she didn't pay taxes. That's because when they turned 65, their property was valueless, practically valueless. Okay, so none of us will experience that. If we're under 65 today, none of us will experience the joy of very little to no taxes. All right, so what can you do to stop the bleeding? Exemptions. Make sure you are taking as many exemptions that you can. For someone such as myself, I'm not disabled, I'm not a veteran, I'm not over 65, I'm just a regular mom. And therefore, all I can do is a homestead exemption, which is a real bummer, but it's there, so I have it. If you are over 65, if you have a disability, if you have a child with a disability that is permanently with you, there are different types of exemptions. So I urge everyone to look into those, do some Googling and see what's available to you based on your own family circumstances. Protest, protest, protest. Now, we're going to be looking at, and I'm going to get into this in a minute and with your sample so you can see what I use. You're going to be looking at surrounding homes that have a lower value. I said taxes, but I mean value. I need to update the wording on this. And then you're going to be showing the condition of your property. So when I do protests, I do two boxes. I say value's not correct compared to neighbors, and condition. And that is because I want to make a bifurcated argument that my house is total crap and I shouldn't live in it, and my neighbors pay way less than I do. Okay. Finally, you can hire a professional. So pre-COVID, they did informals, and I suggested to everyone that you go do your own informal if you have the ability to. If you don't like what you get out of your informal, come hire me. I'll take care of it from there. I got a lot of folks who are like, Lauren, I just don't have time for that. I'll just hire you. Cool. I'm okay with that. I'm that kind of person as well. I do not believe there are going to be informals this year. I don't think so. I think the informal is just going to be through the internet, where you submit your evidence to the internet. Now, what I'm going to show you with the sample presentation is what you can submit through the internet. And you could consider that an informal. If you're not satisfied with what they come back with, then bring out the big guns is my suggestion. Now, I personally, I track my stats because I'm a nerd, and I don't know if you gathered this, but I really like to win and I really don't like to lose. And so last year, 10% value reduction on average. And I had 2 properties that I didn't get a reduction, and that's because I had done them in years prior. So there's nothing left for me to get lowered. Okay. So let's get into the example presentation. This is my fake property tax protest from my fake house in 2019. Presentations don't, the style of the presentation, the content of the presentation never changes, the year does. I, with experience, have learned that it is better to come in with a proposed value than to just be like, meh. And the reason you will see the proposed value on my cover page is because I get that out there right away. I say, look, DCAT has it at 314. My proposal is 260. So now as I'm going in front of the board and I'm describing to them the issues with the house and so on and so forth, I'm saying, here's why it should be 260. They've got 260 in their mind. I have planted that seed. Before I go any further, there's a rule that allows now for the consumer, the taxpayer, to decide who goes first, you or the CAD. Now, as an attorney, I can tell you it is much easier to be on the defense than the offense, okay? So I always let the CAD go first. Go ahead and prove your story to me. Go ahead, because then I take little notes. This is me. I'm going to counteract everything they say. I'm going to make sure I get all the main points. I mean, these are the things I do in court. I treat these like a trial. They're not a trial, but I treat them like that. So I always suggest that you come up with some kind of proposed value to at least plant that seed and have something kind of to work towards. Okay, so I personally like to start my first picture with the front of the house. I don't know why. Well, yeah, I do. I like it's like an introduction. Welcome, this is the home. You know, it's like a book or something. I don't know. So I try to start with a picture of the front of the house. And in an ideal world, there's something wrong with the front of the house. In this particular example, there are some shingles missing on the roof. So it's, hi, welcome to this house. Wow, it's worthless. Okay. Gee, look at that damage. Right off the bat, we have issues with this house. So in an ideal world, you have a nasty front yard or some kind of something wrong in the front. And that's the first picture we start with. I understand some people have like really great curb appeal or like brand new roofs and stuff like that. That's cool and everything. Try to find some damage to start with. Okay. All right. This is actually what I submitted in 2019 about my actual oven. That was my actual oven at the time. And the oven actually did not regulate temperature. I ended up getting it fixed. They just like replaced the oven's brain or something, and it's fine. Why, Lauren, would you put a picture of something where we can't see what's wrong with it? Well, let me answer that. That is because the ARB loves photographs. They love pictures. So even if we can't tell that it doesn't work, even if it looks normal, take a picture of it. Okay, this is a good picture too because it shows you there's no drawer right next to here, right? So I got 2 in 1. We got a poorly regulated oven and no drawer in the kitchen. The drawer is actually on top of the microwave. Here, same idea. This dishwasher has been replaced because it was so crappy. It did not say, it would not clean it. It cleaned dishes the way my 16-year-old son cleans dishes. Okay, it didn't. It was awful. It was trash. But you can't really tell from the picture that it is a useless piece of crap dishwasher. So I take a picture and then I let you know. Does not wash dishes. My photo doesn't show you that, right? I don't have any pictures of the dirty dishes, but this is what they want, guys. So if you have some kind of something that doesn't work or is like inoperable, but it looks normal, that's fine. Take a picture of it. Let them know it looks normal, but it's inoperable. All right, I see some questions, so I'm going to take a brief moment to answer some questions. Let me go back to the very beginning. Becky, your question is, would it help you to put the taxes also, to put the house also in his name and you are 63? I suggest that no one ever just put someone else's name on a property, okay? Becky, you need to have a nice long heart-to-heart with an estate planning attorney, of which I am one. You can call my office. We would need to have a consult, okay? The answer is always no. It could help you, yes, tax-wise, but it could also create some serious mess for you, okay? Holly, you're right. The growth is so hot. These high valuations are only correct if we let them be correct, okay? The more of us that protest, the less correct they are. I already told you that you do need to be in the property on the 1st in order to get the homestead exemption. And Stacy, okay, I'm going to get to this in a minute, but the year you purchase your property, you set the value. So if you bought the property in summer of 2020, the value is what you paid for the property, full stop. If they have you assessed at anything higher than what you paid, all you need to do is send them your closing documents and they will reduce the value to what you paid. However, I have successfully lowered the value twice in a year that a house was purchased. One was my own home and I had like every photo of everything and a good excuse. Oh no, actually both. Sorry, both were myself and someone else. We were both working at AT&T, and AT&T had a program that if we had to move, they would buy the house for at least what we paid for it. And since I was able to show them that, I could show them that I got duped and I paid too much for my house, as did that client. But if you're a normal human being and you don't have a corporation that's going to buy your house no matter what you paid for it, if they decide to move you and you're only going to move if the corporation moves you, then you set the value with your purchase, and all you can do, the best you can do, is get them to reduce it to what you paid. If it's anything below what you paid, just pray, thank Jesus, and walk away. If 2 family members own it and one is 65, my understanding is that they put the 65 plus on half the property. But they also are government employees, so you want to go back and make sure they did that math properly. For anyone who has foundation issues, I highly, highly suggest that you get a foundation company to come give you an estimate. Estimates are the best way to lower a value, because if I have an estimate that says $50,000, they reduce it $50,000. It's 1-for-1 with an estimate, okay? An estimate of repairs is a 1-for-1 reduction. So everything that's broken or was broken on January 1st that you can get an estimate for would be awesome. Appliances do go towards the value of a home. Nobody is going to buy a house with a functionless dishwasher, okay? Your HVAC is not an appliance. Your HVAC is a necessity. It's not even considered a room unless it gets air conditioning to it, okay? So you definitely your HVAC, if it's busted, like doesn't work, you'll put a photo of it and have an estimate of what it takes to have air conditioning, because nobody's going to buy your house without air conditioning. But they can't, just because you got a new HVAC does not mean your value should go up outrageously. Oh, and by the way, one person maybe told one thing and another told another, and that's because we're dealing with the government and there's no consistency. Okay, so back to our example here. This was my front door, and it still is, and it still looks that bad, which is so embarrassing. I did repair it, but it is really ugly. And you can't fully tell the repairs it needs, but you can tell it needs some. So the point of this photo is like, this is actual damage, and I'm showing them actual damage. You can even see down here, right here on the right, how there's like a shadow behind the trim. That's because the the sheetrock is like, or it's not sheetrock, it's that oh, that crap they used in the 60s that looked like fake wood or something, and then it's like bowing. So this is a great picture because it shows you the wall is bowing, and it shows you my door is damaged and all of these other things. Now, I don't have an example of other types of things that I love for pictures, but I love anything that looks like mold. So that black crap in your bathroom that you just can't get rid of, that is absolutely what you want to take a picture of that. Anywhere you see anything that looks like black mold, you take a picture of. Anywhere you see anything that, what I tell folks is, if you would repair it or hide it in order to sell your house, it needs to have a photograph. So in this same house that I have examples of, I have an area where there's a picture, and the picture, if you remove it, has a hole behind it because my son was pubescent and hormonal, and he punched a hole in the wall. I'm not going to fix it because it's not real sheetrock. It's like that weird wood crap from the 60s. So I just like pasted a picture over it. So every year come property tax protest time, I pull the picture off and I take a picture of the hole in the wall. Those are the type of things you're looking for. Holes in the foundation. If you see cracks in the foundation on the outside, I don't care if it's actually a foundation problem. I want pictures of cracks. I want pictures of cracks in tile. I want pictures of, I had a client who had some severe pooling near his front door when it rained. I want pictures of the pooling. I want pictures of those kind of things. Now, I don't know if you're familiar, but over near Wynwood, there was a bunch of Section 8 housing, or subsidized housing, whatever they call it nowadays. And so I had those clients stand outside their front door and take pictures of the government housing from their front door. That will lower the value of your property. People will hesitate, okay? They will hesitate to buy a house that is, photograph across from government apartments, or even real, like not government apartments. If you have some kind of, something that is less than favorable, take a picture. All right, so we'll get into the comps area, but before we do that, I have also started, and I started this 2 years ago, and technically they're not supposed to take this into consideration, but they should, and they do. What I do is I go to the sex offender website and I put in my client's property address, and if there are like red and yellow dots near them, I screenshot it and I put it in here and I say, look how many perverts they live near. I know I'm so mean. You guys would never, ever want to actually come to one of these because I make it sound like you are, like it's trash. It's just dramatics. It helps. Any kind of dramatics helps, okay? Let me go look at these questions before I go to comps. So if you had to rewire the house, that's totally cool. I had to rewire my house 1 year. You definitely want to submit the receipts of how much it cost you, as long as it needed rewiring on January 1st. You'll be able to use it this year, but you won't be able to use it ever again, but that's okay. And I would just take pictures of the vents where the rodents came in. And I think that should be sufficient. Just let them know that rodents were coming in there. If you do go, okay, I need a quote for, but the repair was needed last year as well. Yes, Stacy, you will have to wait because you set the value when you bought it. But next year, you can take that same repair that hasn't been done yet, and you can take that same estimate and get a reduction. I know that's ridiculous and it's stupid and it makes no sense. But again, we're dealing with the government. So that should
Hey,
be.
Lauren,
Yes.
can I ask my question audibly because I'm driving and I don't want to text the chat?
Please, Robert.
I have 2 questions. The first is I bought my house I wasn't in my house in January of 2020. I was in my house in January of 2021.
Okay.
And so what you're telling me is, if I understand, that the value of my house at purchase is what I can protest, and they have to make it that value in 2021. And I might even be able to go lower than that if I get some estimates for repairs and things like that.
If you bought it in 2020, you set the value for January 1st. But
Right.
Your repairs and estimates won't work until next year. Because you set the value, you said, as a consumer, it is acceptable and this house is worth this much, even with these issues. But next year,
okay, but on my closing statement, on my closing statement, it included the furniture in the house. So my deed of trust is actually for a lot less. Will they take the deed of trust?
Yes. Well,
okay.
So let me kind of give a caveat. Robert is an attorney and a friend of mine, everyone. So he can go and be like, well, here's the actual deed of trust, which means I actually borrowed this. And he can explain that to a layperson. I would say that most lay people are not going to be able, Robert, to do that. Although if the furniture was like a line item on the HUD, that is something you can highlight.
Okay. Then the second question, which is totally unrelated to my house.
Okay.
How public are these records? So let's say I have a commercial property.
Okay.
And I'm trying to either buy or sell that commercial property, which in fact, I'm trying to buy a commercial property right now.
Congratulations.
Can I go and get all of the protests? Because this guy that I'm buying it from was very aggressive and he protested all of his properties every year.
Good, smart
Can
guy.
I go and get those protests and use them in negotiations against him when he tries to say it's worth X dollars? I can say, no, because just last year you protested and said it was only worth Y dollars.
Oh, Robert, I love you.
Public record.
I love you so much. Yes and no. So you should be able to go get like the historical values, right, of every year, but you're not going to be able to like go get the details or the recording of the session. That's not going to happen. Those are only available when there's standing with the lawsuit and that kind of stuff. But you should be able to go back and find the historical value year over year and be like, well, I know you told HCAD this. HCAD thought it was this. So yeah, that is a good technique, Robert. And I think I'm going to steal that from you.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I'm going to steal your sex criminal thing too. So.
Oh, thank you. My sex offender registry. Thank you. I just love that.
Pro tip.
If you live anywhere in Dallas, like the only place in the DFW area that does not have sex offenders is Highland Park. Okay. And University Park, the park cities. So if you are at all a normal human being and living in like a regular neighborhood, you will have sex offenders on the map. So highly, highly recommend that one.
Okay. If you have a neighbor from hell, you can add that in there too. You can.
Yes,
like,
actually,
look.
Robert, that is a great point. So one year I had this lady and she's like, Lauren, my house is amazing. My house is perfect. But the dude next door inherited his house and he hasn't mowed his lawn in like 3 years. And there are feral cats coming in and out of it. Her entire evidence that I provided was pictures of his lawn, his back lawn. Okay. And I got a reduction. I had another gal who had moved in a neighborhood. She was the first house to gentrify. So like the first one to be nice. And there's like trash in the street and all this stuff. I had to send me pictures of the trashy streets. And I got that too. So if your neighbors are crappy, we can absolutely use crappy neighbors. 100%. Yes. Even if you can't see them. Okay. Hold on. I've got some more questions. Robert, is that all of yours?
That's all. That's me. I'll put myself back on mute. And we just went through College Station. We're on our way to Meridian, Texas.
Oh, wow.
Zoom court was fantastic. I want my sweatpants back.
I know, me too. Oh my goodness. Okay. Y'all are gonna hear lawyers crying all the time. Oh, I had to put on a blazer. Oh, okay. So the okay, so Yvette, to answer your question, is it possible the house needs so much work that they would condemn it? The government, one government entity, DCAD, I promise you, does not communicate with another government entity, the city attorney or the zoning or the, oh, what are they called? Oh, the people who write you those stupid tickets for your house. The name fought me. So to presume that simply because one government entity knows your house should be torn down, that some other government entity that's even the same government, but just like a different department, that those two would communicate is giving way too much credit to our government. Okay, Yvette? So the answer is no. We're about to get into the price per square foot here, Rose. So let's get into my comps. The way I do comps, like I told you, I only use neighbors on the same street. The law says neighbors, and I define neighbors as the people who I know, okay? They say neighborhood, and I guarantee you if it's on my street, it's in my neighborhood. But if it's on some other street, it might not be. What I do is I simply go to the DCAD website and I put in a range of addresses. So on this one, it's 5746. The highlighted one is our subject property. So I would put in a range like 5,500 to 5,800. And then I put in this strange word, Bryn Mawr, and I hit enter. And then I go through each one and I find the ones that fit the argument I'm trying to make. So on this one, 5737, the square footage according to DCAD is 2,092, and DCAD has it valued at $600,480. So to get the price per square foot, I simply divide this price by the square foot, price per square foot, per being the backslash, meaning divide. That's like all I remember about math, y'all. And I'm actually pretty proud of myself for remembering that one. So in this example, I got two neighbors here who are being taxed at or valued by the government at $290 and $282 per square foot. But my subject property is at $430. That is ungodly compared to what the neighbors are paying. So I would use this evidence to show that I should be somewhere between 282 and 290. So when I gave you my suggested, so I gave you the DCAD value and then my suggested value, I create the suggested value based off of this little exercise I do here. And I really just eyeball it. It's not an exact science. Usually I just take the lower one and I multiply 282 by the square feet and I call it a day. I always go with the lowest. You know, this is a negotiation. I always start where I want. So I go as low as humanly possible and make them come up. But it's really math intensive. You can teach Excel how to do the equation for you so that you can kind of plug and chug pretty easily. I use maybe 3 to 4 properties, including the one we're there for, the word just lost my mind, sorry. I use maybe 2 to 3 other properties, and I do not use the ones where they're being taxed at a higher, or if it doesn't, if we found another neighbor and they were paying like $330 a foot, that's still higher than what I want for my client. So I'm going to stick with these 2 much lower ones. And the onus is on the government to say what, to show that you're wrong. The website I use to get these comps is just the CAD's website. So I'll go to DCAD or CCAD or whoever's CAD I need to go to. Becky, we do not do the government's job for them. Okay. The law says that you need to be taxed as your neighbors. You're valued as your neighbors. Now, the law also says that the values need to be market. Is it my fault that the government doesn't have my neighbors at market? No. Am I going to give the government market when I know my neighbors are less than market? Also no. It's their job. All you use is what's best for you. Becky, I don't care what DCAD told you. They're your enemy. They're on the other side of the V. They're making an argument against you. So that's cute that they said that, and that's how they come to the assessment. But we don't care. I don't care. I don't care what they have to say. If they didn't let you use the values, I really can't speculate, Becky, but I would assume you were not in front of the ARB board. So when I'm in front of the ARB board, I just use my own values and I go toe to toe against the CAD person. To Rose, oh, I'm so glad you brought up land. Okay, so what was last year, 2020, 2019? In the year 2019, someone at BearCAD in San Antonio got smart. And they said, hey, if every lot in this neighborhood is the same size, and most lots in most neighborhoods are about the same size approximately, and we're valuing based off neighbors, if we bump up the land value and we make it even through the whole neighborhood, nobody can argue that. And they're right. So where you're going to see your biggest increases year over year is in land. And the only way to argue land is if you have land that is unusable. So I had a client, like this is their whole property, but there's like this weird easement on the property. So you can only use like this much, even though they have a whole sheet of paper, they can only use like a quarter of the paper. Because they showed the government that a quarter of their land is useless, they were able to get a reduction in the land value. But if you have a normal lot on normal land, like a normal person, which probably almost everyone who's watching this or participating, this would apply to, you're not going to get any reduction on land. So you don't divide by the square feet of the land, you divide by the house. You're looking at price per square foot of the house. That is the calculation. So the way they started getting people, their little gotcha, is to really crank up the land. And there's nothing we can do about land. As long as they did so evenly across the whole neighborhood and every lot that's approximately the same size as yours is the same value as yours, you're SOL on land. And the government did that on purpose, and it's kind of clever. So whoever thought of that probably doesn't work for them anymore. All right, so the next steps. When you decide to hire Cadillac Law, I have here, this is outdated. An email will send to you with forms. We actually use a software now called MyCase, and we can have you fill out the forms and sign the forms within the software. There is an agency form that is required by the CAD for me to go talk on your behalf. And then there's the notice of valuation form. Some folks hire me after they've already attempted their protest, so they've already done their notice of valuation. That is perfectly acceptable. My preference is that I get to do it because I know which boxes to check and I know which arguments I want to make. If you don't check the correct boxes, you might exclude yourself from making certain arguments. It's up to you. I mean, it's your home, it's your money. You're going to do what's best for you and your family. And I'm here to help you and support you anyway. You know, whenever you're ready to hire us, if that's after you filled out that form or before, either way is acceptable. So once you've filled out the forms and signed them, take them back to us, then you are going to take pictures and collect estimates. Estimates are really money, y'all. If you can get someone to come out and be like, oh, this roof needs to be replaced at $10,000, I'm knocking 10K like that. Boom, right? So if you, Frank, you said there was a foundation issue, get a foundation dude out there ASAPly. I can't remember who was said that Rose, it was you who had got your electric redone. Get that receipt. That's what, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 that had to be put into the house. So you can deduct that from the value as long as the electric hadn't been redone on January 1st. So you'll send all of this evidence to us, and then I will put it together in a presentation. I will get the comps like I showed you. I will look for the sex offenders. I will do all of that. And then I go to the board. I never do the informals because I just see that as a waste of time. They give me a day. I have like a code and a name, and I get a day and a time. And I go to the board and I spend my whole day with them. And I convince them that you are either a slumlord or you live in absolute filth, and I get your value lowered. Then when the board comes up with a new value, we send that off to you and you'll receive a letter within 10 days. Now, one of the benefits I see of hiring an attorney such as myself is if you're not satisfied with what the board gave you, I can do the arbitration for you. Or I had last year, the CAD couldn't find 4 of my protests. Isn't that convenient? And I sued him. And actually, I just got values for those clients 2 days ago. It took forever, but because I'm an attorney, I can sue. And in that particular case, they ignored my property as well. So I sued on all of our behalf. Those are kind of benefits in my opinion. Now, if you do end up having to go to arbitration after the ARB board has reviewed it, I've had like 1 or 2 clients go to arbitration, and one of them specifically went because specifically the ARB board read a note that said specifically someone had inspected their kitchen. And my client was like, no, he didn't. I called the police on him when he was trying to creep around my house. So we went to the arbitration. Now, the nice thing is if we win at arbitration, you end up getting your arbitration fee back from the CAD. Hey. Also, another thing I've heard, and this is just a rumor, is that if you arbitrate or sue, they won't reassess your value for 3 years. So if you end up ever having to get to the arbitration level or a lawsuit, it should be another 3 years before they come assess your value. Now, that's just a rumor I've heard. That is not a fact, but I'm experimenting because I sued on my house this year and they didn't adjust my value. So we'll see. I'll get back to you on that one, folks. Okay. What other questions do we have regarding property taxes, property tax protests, anything we've discussed today? Anyone have any other questions? All right, awesome. So because it's property tax, oh, Robert, you have a question? Go ahead.
Is it possible to put a property into a trust and still be able to benefit from homestead and veteran tax exemption? The reason I ask is because I have some security concerns with my job. I'm not going to go into what I do for a living, but sometimes people aren't very happy with my job. And they would like to come talk with me about it. Huh?
Robert. So I have similar security concerns, and I have a trust, and my trust owns my house. And I am an attorney that does trust. So if you're interested, you have security concerns like Robert does, we could talk about getting your trust. I use magic language inside of my trust that allow you to keep your homestead, and they allow you to do your protest. Yes, absolutely. 100% allowed to do that. So that was a great question, Robert, and I really appreciate that. Stacy, if I protest, do they automatically raise it back next year? Because no, they don't know that you're repairing your house. If you don't go get a permit, they don't know anything, right? It's only when you get permits and do remodels that require permits that they know what's going on inside your home. Okay. So they're not going to know that you fixed your lamp or that the fan, you got a new ceiling fan, or, you know, the minor little stuff we're allowed to do without government oversight. It's the permitted stuff that they are able to go back and oh, there's a permit pulled for blah, blah, blah. I have had that happen, and there were permits, but the house still wasn't built. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. They got the permit, but it's still not built. So it doesn't matter. But I had a photo to show them that it still wasn't built. Yvette, you absolutely want to fill out your homestead as soon as possible. If you're in the property on January 1st, you want to make sure you have your homestead. You also want to look in to see if any other exemptions are available to you. Rose, thank you. Taxes are never fun, but I try to make everything as fun as possible. Now, I am, because it's property tax protest season, I am doing this seminar every other Thursday, I believe, until well into May. But starting in June, I do other seminars about estate planning, trusts, wills, things that Robert touched on lightly today. And I do those year round for everyone. So if y'all have any questions, you can always call Cadillac Law at 972-845-1200. And I know a lot of you got a hold of us through our website, which is cadillaclaw.net. And Cadillac is spelled with one L. You have the letter from them, but did your house how to? I did my paperwork, but I don't.
I don't understand this paperwork and like.
So, Rose, call my office tomorrow. I can look up your address and tell you if your homestead has been properly processed. But I got to tell you guys, I hope I have taught you over the course of the last hour that the government is not exactly that bright, and it's not efficient, and it doesn't communicate within itself. Okay. So you might you might have sent it in and then you're like, did they do it? Whatever. And they might not have, they might have done it wrong. I do a lot of ladybird deeds, and oftentimes they put the ownership in the person who's not supposed to get ownership until the other person's deceased. So just call my office tomorrow. We'll look into DCAD. I should be able to tell just by looking at DCAD if they did it right. If they didn't, just fill it out again and send it in again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending. This is like a huge turnout. I'm so excited. Kind of made my head a little bigger. I feel like I'm so special, and I really appreciate you spending your evening with me. If you have any other questions, Cadillac Law, yeah, Yvette, I guarantee you that's what they did with your ladybird deed. They do that so often with ladybird deeds that I have a form letter that just says, hey, you idiots, it's a ladybird deed. It's nicer than that. But I have a form letter so that when my client's like, Lauren, why does it say this? I just print it out and send it in to fix it up. But thank y'all for coming. I much appreciate your attendance and your questions. And I hope that when you need a lawyer, you think of me. If you need your property tax protest taken care of, that you use Cadillac Law, and give us a call if you have any needs at all. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.